On this episode of Phinside The NFL, the Miami Dolphins have made their first move heading into the trade deadline as they've shipped off Jaelan Phillips to the Philadelphia Eagles. We will talk about this in depth. What did the Dolphins get? Was it a good move? Plus, I'm hearing some things, and the Dolphins may be far from done with the Tuesday 4 p.m. trade deadline approaching. We will cover all of that, plus a little bit on Tua's future. So smash that like button. Subscribe if you are new. And as always, let's get into this.
Loses the football. Touchdown! Got it! You have got to be kidding me. Jalen Waddle has a Dolphin touchdown. And he will score! Field down the near side, man open. Touchdown! The run from Tua Tagovialoa. Touchdown! He's going deep. He's got it for a touchdown again.
Beautiful day to be a Dolphin fan. Let's go! What is good, Finn Nation? What's good? It's your boy Reason. We are back here for another one. I appreciate each and every one of you coming through. You know there are heartbroken fans in the fan base, but most of those broken fans are, in fact, females. So we got a lot to discuss here as the Miami Dolphins move off of Jaelan Phillips. Before we do, I do want to shout out the sponsor of today's video. That, of course, is Sleeper. Get a $100 deposit match right now by using code Phinside. Go ahead, sign up. Get a free $20 deposit into your account with no deposit required on your end. That $20 deposit comes from Sleeper. So, with more stats than any other daily fantasy app, just choose 2 or more of your favorite players from pregame or live. Pick more or less on the predicted stats. You can win up to 1,000 times your money if your picks win. Use promo code Phinside, and you get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Go check out Sleeper today. All right, we got a lot to talk about here, so let's not waste any time. Let's go ahead. Let's get into it because there is more than Jaelan Phillips to discuss today. All right, so we got an early one. Get your coffee brewed, get your coffee ready, stir in that cream or milk, whatever you like in that sugar, and let's go, all right? So let's start off with, obviously, the big news of the morning. And that big news is that the Miami Dolphins are trading Jaelan Phillips for a 2026 third-round pick to the Philadelphia Eagles. Remember, a few things here. Jaelan Phillips was a pending unrestricted free agent. All right? I mean, you know, the fact of the matter here is if Phillips had departed in free agency, we might have got a compensatory pick, but it wouldn't have been in 2026. It would have been in 2027. And it would have probably been, you know, I mean, it could be a late third anyways because of the Eagles, but it could have even been a late fourth. So with this move, you are guaranteeing you get that third round pick. You're guaranteeing you get that. No risk of missing out and being stuck with a fourth round pick at all. So, I mean, you know, here's the fact of the matter. We all knew this was a real possibility with Jaelan Phillips. I mean, you know, it's going to be tough if we watch him obviously go to Philadelphia and reach the ceiling we all know he has, it's going to be tough to watch that happen for sure. But I mean, what were we seeing this year? I mean, we should have beat the Chargers if he finishes the sack. I mean, against Lamar earlier in the game, has a chance to finish off a sack, doesn't finish off the sack, and Lamar turns it into a 30-plus yard, throw and catch. Jaelan Phillips, the one thing you can say about Jaelan Phillips is he was, the pressure rate was there. It's just the finishing wasn't where we wanted it to be this year. And what's made it even worse was he wasn't finishing in critical times. And that was the big issue with Jaelan Phillips. Now, obviously, the other thing too is his injury history. Jaelan Phillips coming off a serious injury after another serious injury. You know what I mean? Like, they're starting to stack up. Now, Jaelan Phillips had a 19.3 pass rush win rate this season, and he had an 18.1 pressure percentage up until this point. I mean, the fact of the matter is, right now, Jaelan Phillips is now the best edge rusher that the Philadelphia Eagles have. I mean, that's pretty much a fact. He is now their best edge rusher. I mean, those numbers that I just threw out you, his pass rush win rate and his pressure percentage, they automatically become the best pressure rate and pass rush win rate on the Eagles right now. Since week 5, Jaelan Phillips actually has the third highest pressure rate in the NFL. So, Jaelan Phillips, 55 games played with the Miami Dolphins, 26 sacks, 61 quarterback hits, 177 tackles, 28 tackles for a loss, an interception, a forced fumble, 7 pass deflections. Now remember, this was a guy who a lot of people didn't want to take coming out of UCLA. A lot of people were very weary of taking a guy like Jaelan Phillips because of his injury history. Remember, he was forced to medically retire coming out of UCLA. Then he went to the Miami Hurricanes, was beasting it, right? Him and Greg Rousseau were beasting it. And people were afraid of his injury history back in UCLA, and that was kind of making people pause. I mean, I remember going into spaces and defending this kid as a first-round pick when people were saying they wouldn't touch him with the pick we took Javon Holland with in the second round. So, it's sad here because of a few things. Number one, you hate to see first-round homegrown talent with still 26 years old with still a ceiling to reach, still some high potential to him, and we're in this position we're in, and you got to give him up for a third. That sucks. But at the end of the day, I've been saying this, right? All season, especially me and Neil when we sat up here, were they ever really going to pay him? Like, ask yourself this. Were they ever really going to pay him? And then what comes out, the first thought in your mind is going to be, no, they were never going to pay this guy. Jaelan Phillips just wasn't part of the future plans in Miami. And that's really all there is to it. And now, he's gone. Now, what this does do is open up more snaps for Chop Robinson. That is 110%. More snaps are now opened up for Chop Robinson. He can get those snap counts up and he can get back to working. I will say this, an interesting thing too. Walk with me, as the kids say. What if now, and this would be, this was kind of my fear of, if you were going to move a Jalen Waddle, are they going to be looking for an edge? Are they going to be looking for an edge now in the NFL draft? Obviously, Reuben Bain Jr., he's the apple of a lot of people's eyes. But I'll say Cassius Howell out of Texas A&M. There's a lot of people who think he's better than Ruben Bain right now. And this would be this was kind of my fear with moving a Jalen Waddle. What, you're going to be stuck having to draft like Jordan Tyson now in the top 10 with that pick you get? And now that's where I'm at. So what, are we just going to go back and draft another edge rusher? Like, what if they don't finish with a top 3 pick? What if they don't have a top 3 pick to get a quarterback? Does that mean they're now going to go draft like Cassius Howell or Ruben Bain in the top 10? Because that would kind of... I know Dolphin fans would not be excited to see another edge rusher. They weren't excited when we took Chop Robinson. Maybe they're more excited if we take a guy like Ruben Bain because he's homegrown talent. This is a very interesting question, Kevin. I'm going to tell you this. Let's talk about this for a second. Okay, I'm gonna put this out there. Okay, now that we're starting to see things play out. Okay, if we don't draft a quarterback, I've said, and I'll stay consistent, I want Spencer Fano from Utah, or I want Francis Moigoa, from Miami. I want one of those 2 right tackles. Austin Jackson, get out of here. Okay? That's number 1. Okay? Number 2, if this team is going quarterback, and I want you to listen to me right now, if this team is going quarterback, and I know this might not be very popular with some people, if this team is going quarterback and Mike McDaniel is here, listen, I like Mendoza, but we don't have the offensive line. I honestly think Dante Moore and Ty Simpson make more sense if McDaniel is still here. I get everyone likes Mendoza, but you don't have the offensive line for him. Simpson's a very good athlete. Dante Moore's a very good athlete. They can create out of structure. They're very accurate. They're great passers. That if you were taking a quarterback, they make more sense schematically, in my opinion, than Fernando Mendoza does. Now, can Fernando Mendoza execute the scheme? I think so, 110%. The problem is he's probably going to get killed back there. Now, Lenore Sellers. I think Lenore Sellers should go back next year. I think Lenore Sellers should enter the transfer portal. But I'll tell you this, what I've said. I was talking about this earlier. I'll say it again. Lenore Sellers and Taylon Green and Lenore Sellers scare the hell out of me with this coaching staff. Y'all really think they can develop guys that need that much work from the pocket and that much refinement with their mechanics? I mean, hey, shout out to all of you if you do, because you got more faith in this coaching staff than I do. But you need that's the thing. If you don't get one of those top 3 guys, you need as close to a finished product as possible. That's why I get the Mendoza infatuation. But when you look at what's happening schematically and with this offensive line, Ty Simpson and Dante Moore might be the better options. Lenore Sellers and Taylon Green, with the work that's needed to their game, from mechanics to the pocket stuff, guys, I mean, I do not trust. You are going to put a top 5 pick in play for a Lenore Sellers, and you're going to trust this coaching staff with Lenore Sellers? Are you crazy? You need like a quarterback whisperer. You need like a Pep Hamilton on this staff. You need someone who's proven, man. That's my issue with that. Should this be the start of sending all injury-prone players off? Start with Austin Jackson, in my opinion. I mean, there's no market for Austin Jackson. Those are not the facts. You watch the tape. You don't watch the logo of the team they play for. If you're not going to dismiss Ty Simpson just because he plays for Alabama, you got no business talking about the NFL draft, because that's just an ignorant take. And all you Herbert lovers, I mean, he's from where? Oregon? So, no. You don't. That's an awful take. Awful take. And those are not facts. That's your opinion. And it's a very skewed and ignorant opinion. So, no. I'm not afraid. The tape is what would scare me, not the school they went to. I don't care about the school. It's about the tape. I don't care about what school they went to. I could give a crap. So it's all about the tape. The only thing that matters with the school is the competition they're playing. So, yeah, that's where I stand with that draft. That's a good question, though. All right, so let's get some more clarity on the look at this, and it's not clear cut. Mendoza's not clear cut by any stretch of the imagination. And that's funny. Listen, you don't draft an Alabama QB, let alone an Oregon QB, but you draft a QB from Indiana. Name me the quarterbacks from Indiana that have worked out if you're going to use that logic and throw that logic around. That's terrible. That's awful. Name me the guy that came from Indiana. All right. Anyways, let's get a little bit more clarity on this whole situation, okay? And in terms of that 3rd round pick. So here's the clarity. The Eagles are sending their own 3rd round pick to the Dolphins, not the one they acquired from the Jets in the Hassan Reddick trade. So that is going to be the lower of the 2 3rd round picks. All right. So, I mean, did we really think they were going to give up? The Jets is going to be at the top of the 3rd round. We really think they were going to give that up? I don't think so. That would be the absolute wishful thinking. Now, that right now as it stands, all right. Right now as it stands, that would be pick. The Jets pick would be like pick 67 right now. All right. The Eagles pick, I believe it's between 96 and 99 right now. So it's a top 100 pick right now. The pick you got back from Jaelan Phillips. Right? I mean, that is an interesting thing. Stick around, George, because I'm going to talk about that in depth in a minute here. All right? Sam Levitt isn't coming out till 2027 with Julian Sane and stuff from what I understand and what I've been told. So I will talk about who gets traded, and don't worry, we're going to go over that. But so that's a top 100 pick you got. I mean, getting a top 100 pick in this year's draft for a guy who's more than likely not returning, I'll take that. I'll take that. I mean, it is what it is. I mean, I think we're just all at the point where we knew they wasn't getting extended. He was another player who kind of worn out his welcome between injuries and then the play on the field. Right? That's just where we're at. So, listen. The draft person in me hates the value. It hates the fact you gave up like a top 20 pick to draft Jaelan Phillips and that you're getting like a top 100 pick back. I hate it. But, I mean, it is what it is at this point. They weren't going to pay him. And that's the way you have to look at it. And what's crazy is if this was what was on the table, what was Chris Grier asking for if he was hanging up on people? If Chris Grier was hanging up on, people and listening, but not really wanting to trade for Jaelan Phillips, when Jaelan Phillips was one of those names, what was he actually what was he actually asking for? Was this guy out here asking for like a 2nd round pick? That's what's interesting to me. What was Grier actually asking for in return? Right? Vince fan, here's a dilemma. If we get a top 5 pick this year, don't take a quarterback. We guarantee we'll have it next year at our disposal. Yeah. The thing is, if you get a top 5 pick this year, I mean, you got to think to yourself, when are we going to get another chance at a top 5 pick? And I'll say this. You can't tear this roster down till there's nothing there, especially if you want to draft a quarterback. If you want to draft a quarterback, you can't trade Waddle, you can't trade HN, you can't trade Brewer, you can't trade Patrick Paul. You got to continue to build the offensive line out, et cetera, et cetera. You can't totally make the cupboard bare here if you are planning on taking a quarterback, because if you do hit on the right guy, this could be a quick turnaround in terms of, yeah, you're locked into Tua for 2026, but if Tua gets hurt in 2026, or, you know, if you just tell Tua, hey, listen, we're going with this guy after this year, you know, you got 2 free agencies and 2 drafts to build a team out. So that's the thing about that's the thing about getting a top 5 pick and staring down the barrel at those quarterbacks. Now I think you're going to need a top 3 pick, but staring down the barrel at Mendoza, Moore, and Simpson, you don't know if you're going to have that chance next year when Julian Sayin and Sam Levitt and Lenore Sellers, if he goes back, and John Mateer, if he goes back, if those guys come out. And I mean, for all of you that are still on the Arch bandwagon, there you go. You know, you're not going to have a shot. You don't know if you're going to have a shot. Would management force McCochin to place Jonah at his position at right guard? I don't know. We have, listen, I was talking about this. We have seen them step in before, right? People seem to forget years and years ago in 2020 as a rookie, Stephen Ross and Chris Greer sat Brian Flores down without Chan Gailey in the room, and they said, guess what? You got to play Tua Tagovailoa. We all remember that. Well, some of us remember it. Others seem to have forgotten that happened. So, I don't know. I doubt it. You know, they might say, hey, you got to play him, but I doubt they get into like the personnel and positioning. You know, I don't think, you know, now maybe the GM does, but Champ Kelly, if he sticks around, doesn't come off as a guy who's going to ruffle feathers. You know? And I know people are not happy, man. You know? People are not happy in the chat right now that, you know, the value we're getting. But this is where we're at. I've been wrong about everything, apparently. The best player on the team is Devon Achane, that I was out ahead of a year before he was drafted. Right? I wanted Jackson Dart last year. Does Jackson Dart look like the most dynamic quarterback out of this class? Let me know. I wanted Penei Sewell, you know, and that instead of Jalen Waddle, I wanted Penei Sewell. Is Penei Sewell one of the best right tackles in football? Right? I didn't want Austin Jackson when we drafted him. Did I end up being right about that? I hated the Noah Igbenogany pick when we made it. I wanted Jonathan Taylor. Did I end up being right about that? Should I keep going about how right I've been? You know, you guys think the quarterback is the only position that exists in football. And actually, people who didn't want Tua were actually wrong, because they told everyone Tua would never go to a Pro Bowl. Tua would never lead the league in passing. They told people, they called Josh Rosen a franchise quarterback. Looks like Tua went to the Pro Bowl. Looks like Tua led the league in passing. And Josh Rosen ain't in the league anymore. So, you know, before you come in here, get your facts straight. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. All right. I mean, hold on. Wasn't I the one pushing Drake May out of the... Let's go even further. Wasn't I the one pushing Drake May out of the 2023 draft when everyone said Caleb Williams was the dude? Wasn't that me over here saying Drake May's this guy? Oh yeah, but people wanted... Didn't certain people who thought Josh Rosen was a franchise quarterback, didn't they want Michael Penix? How's that Michael Penix thing working out? Michael Penix doesn't look very dynamic at all. Michael Penix doesn't look like a top 20 pick. Thank you very much. Oh, hold on. What? In 2019, when Arizona State beat Oregon, wasn't I the one telling everyone that Jaden Daniels would be super dynamic? Now, I know he got hurt on Monday Night Football, but wasn't I the one saying Jaden Daniels would be really good? Wasn't that me? Wasn't that me? Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, my bad. I just, someone wanna mention one slip up, and I can come back and name 10 hits right away. So, thank you for coming out. Didn't we drafted Channing Tindall, right? Didn't I want Leo Chanel? Year before that, didn't I want Nick Bolton? Weren't those two of the key pieces of the Kansas City defense when they won Super Bowls in the recent years? Oh, yeah, that's right, they were. My bad. We took Channing Tindall and I was screaming for Leo Chanel. My bad. I forgot. I was right there again. Sorry. I just had to re-kick everything. When a person comes in here and says you're wrong about everything and all they're talking about is the quarterback position, and I can sit here and prove how right I am, fun exercise. So with the Dolphins, speaking of the draft and the Dolphins, all right, I want you to check this out. This is where we're sitting at right now with the draft. Look at the treasure chest that they are starting to put out here. Right now, the Dolphins own 8 draft picks. They own a pick in the first, a pick in the second, a pick in the third, 3 third-round picks, a fourth, a fifth, and a 7. So they are stacking up right now. They are stacking the picks up right now. And I'm going to tell you this right now. They have a whole bunch of ammo if they want to move up. They got a whole bunch of ammo. Whole bunch of ammo. Now, this is what we go back to, okay? Now, we got to have this conversation with this ammo right now for a second. We got to have a real conversation because we're sitting here talking Mendoza. We're sitting here talking about Moore, Simpson. This is, and I had this conversation last night. This is the problem where I'm at. To me, you need a top 3 pick, all right? Because if you're at 4 or 5 and you got to trade into the top 3, it's going to be expensive. That's number 1. Number 2, okay, I don't whether you like Mendoza, whether you like Moore, whether you like Ty Simpson, whether you like Lenore Sellers, whomever you like, okay? Whatever the case is in that top 5, all right? The issue you now run into is none of these players are I don't want to, how do I word this properly? None of these players are popping off your screen as sure bet blue chip prospects. I don't want to use the term generational, all right? Andrew Luck was generational coming out, Peyton Manning, you know what I mean? But I'll give you an example. Joe Burrow, right? Joe Burrow is a perfect example. Joe Burrow, now take away the injury factor, okay? Because no one saw it being this bad, right? He's hurt more than Tua, right? And remember, Joe Burrow and Tua were my 2 favorite quarterbacks in that class, followed by Jordan Love. That's another thing. Didn't I want Jordan Love? And every Dolphin fan, when I was on the Tuesday night panel, said he'll never be good. He threw more interceptions than touchdowns in his last year at Utah. And now don't I see Dolphin fans saying they wish we took Jordan Love all the time? Oh, that's interesting. I was right about that too. Anyways, the issue you run into is with Joe Burrow, we knew he was a blue chip prospect. You knew it was he's worth tanking for. The problem here is I don't get excited about any of these guys like I did even about Jackson Dart last year. Now, I think Mendoza's got, from a passing standpoint, I think he's got the tools. But, you know, like, and then you look at Dante Moore. Dante Moore still needs a little bit more work. You look at Ty Simpson, he still needs a little bit more work. And then it drops off to like Lenore Sellers needs a ton of work, you know, and Taylor Green needs a ton of work. I think Brandon Sorsby needs some work. You know, I don't think John Mateer's coming out, so that's why I'm not mentioning him. But my whole point is, you're not sitting there like, okay, as much as people want Mendoza, I don't see people salivating over Mendoza like they were for Burrow. You know, like, that's the problem. And if my whole point is now, if you have if you have those draft picks, it's going to be A, expensive to move up, and B, if you don't feel like there's a surefire blue chip prospect at quarterback, do you pay that cost to move up if you aren't in the top 3? Like, are you going to pay multiple first round picks and like a second or third round pick to move up for a guy you're good with, but you're not salivating over? That's what gives me pause right now. Now that could change because there's still a lot of college football to play, et cetera, but right now, if we're sticking with McDaniel, Dante Moore and Ty Simpson schematically fit this more. You know, we'd get Mendoza killed with this offensive line. And I think Nick nails it. Do you trade back? I don't know. You know? So that's an interesting, that is to me an interesting angle in all this. What if you don't land a top 3 pick? Are you going to mortgage the future for one of these guys when none of them pops off as like a top tier blue chip prospect like Joe Burrow was? We'll see. We'll see. And I want to use the word top tier blue chip prospect because I do think Mendoza, Moore, and Ty Simpson got some blue chip in them. I do. But like a top tier blue chip prospect in this draft, it's like, to me, like Ruben Bain and Cassius Howell, like blue chip prospects. So, and really, I think the teams you have to worry about in front of you that might take a quarterback are obviously the Jets, right? I mean, obviously the Jets. All right, there's like obviously no ifs, ands, or buts about that. New Orleans is probably going to take a quarterback, right? Because right now New Orleans has the number 1 pick. Tennessee has 2. The Jets are 3. Now, if Miami really likes one of these guys, they could move up with Tennessee. You don't want the Jets picking ahead of you. Had he had a better season, I think the Saints would have went after Garrett Nussmeier. But I really think from this standpoint, you know, the Saints to me are probably where Mendoza or I think, you know, I think there's a strong possibility Simpson goes number 1 overall too. Like, I think people are really discounting that. I'm telling you, his mechanics are really, really good. His footwork is some of the best. His footwork is the best in this class. So, yeah. It is what it is, right? Now, let's talk about a few things. Number 1, let's get into a little bit further here. I got a few things to talk about. Let's talk about the trade deadline, and let's also talk about Tua a bit more. Okay, so we got a lot still to talk about here. All right, could there be more deals on the way for the Miami Dolphins? What am I hearing right now? I am hearing that the Miami Dolphins are not done. All right, I am hearing that the Miami Dolphins are not done. And the names I'm hearing are very interesting. Bradley Chubb. Yes, the Miami Dolphins could send another another one, another edge rusher. I'm hearing there are teams interested in Bradley Chubb. Specifically, I've heard Baltimore and San Francisco. I've heard Judon is still out there, and they're still looking to move Judon. There's a couple names in the secondary they are looking to move as well. Smash that like button, guys. Subscribe if you're new. I'm giving it to you right now. Minkah Fitzpatrick is available right now to be had by a team. Minkah Fitzpatrick is being shopped right now. I can tell you that. Another name who's drawing actual interest is Rasul Douglas. Right? Rasul Douglas is drawing a lot of interest. Chubb, from what I hear, Baltimore and San Francisco are two of the teams that are in on Chubb. Minkah is out there and available to be had right now, and they're trying to move Judon. Now, what you got to think about here is if Jaelan Phillips fetched you a third-round pick, don't expect much for Chubb. To me, that means Chubb is probably a fifth rounder, if that. Judon's probably a seventh rounder. Now, I do think they will try and get a third round pick or value in that range for Minkah. Rasul Douglas, I could see that being another, fifth round pick. But those are the names I have been hearing all morning from multiple people. So I've heard Rasul and Chubb from three different people. Minkah and Minkah, as well as Judon, I've heard from two different people today about. So yeah, they ain't done. If they can get good value back, the Miami Dolphins are not done wheeling and dealing, and we're going to see more moves before Tuesday's deadline. Now, what's interesting, though, if you trade, let's say you get offers you like. Let's say you get a fifth for Chubb. Let's say you get a third for Minkah. And let's say you get a fifth from Rasul Douglas. Now it becomes interesting with Mike McDaniel because, what do you guys really have now? And then what do you do with Anthony Weaver? Right? You are totally gutting his defense. Now, Jaelan Phillips, he's gone. The other Jaelan that we've heard about, Jalen Waddle, man, I've heard it's going to take a Tyreek Hill type of offer. Basically what they gave up for Tyreek Hill is what they would need to even consider trading Jalen Waddle. So I do not expect Jalen Waddle to be traded. And if I were you, I would not expect Jalen Waddle to be traded. The offensive pieces are costing more right now. Achane not going to get traded either. So it's really the defense is being gutted a little bit. And what's funny is the defense has just started coming around the last couple weeks and they're gutting them. And then, if you got this team, we know you got, I go back to the whole McDaniel deal. Was I right a couple weeks ago when I told all of y'all when I did that video, are the Dolphins secretly tanking? Did this man walk into Stephen Ross's office and say, hey, listen, Stephen, I've taken Tua as far as I can. I got him to a Pro Bowl. He's your reclamation project. You brought me in. I did what I can. No one else here can do that. You got to let me go pick my guy now. Tua's regressing. He's holding my offense back. You can't take a hit. Blah, 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 blah. Give me the chance to go draft my guy. And did Stephen Ross say, okay, Mike, as long as you're willing to throw the season? Because, we hear reports, well, he's evaluating the rest of the season and wants to see how it goes. How the hell is this season going to go if you got the team for McDaniel? And I'm not even defending the guy. You all know I'm ready to move on. Been ready to move on since we're 2-6 last year. What are you gonna say now? What do you do? There's no way this team's gonna get to 6 or 7 wins if you trade Jaelan Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Rasul Douglas, and Minka Fitzpatrick. There's just zero way. What makes me think, because I've been told by someone who's very much in the know, that we're asking for a ton for Waddle. Not to mention, you've seen the reports from Rappaport and such saying we need to have our, the doors blown off. We need to be blown away by the offer. I further inquired about what that offer could be, and that's what I was told. Exactly. 110%. But didn't McDaniel push for 2 extension and Ross hated the idea? No, Ross didn't hate the idea. Brandon Shore hated the idea. McDaniel and Greer went over Brandon Shore's head. Brandon Shore did not want to give new money to Tua and Tyreek Hill. McDaniel and Greer went over Brandon Shore, went to Stephen Ross, and got those contracts handled. So, I mean, no, yeah. See, and Ross, and let's talk about Tua for a second here. Where Ross is starting to sour on Tua is last year and this year. Last year, hurt again. This year, not playing well and causing issues. The problem with Ross now is he's a businessman and he's looking at Tua as a bad investment since they gave him that deal. That's the problem. And then, you guys, I've told you for years, Brandon Shore, next to Tom Garfinkel and Stephen Ross, is the most powerful man in that building. Brandon Shore is telling him, see, I told you, you shouldn't have listened to these guys. Which, to your point further with this, McDaniel's being given grace. McDaniel's being grace. So am I, dude. I'm concerned that Champ Kelly is going to be the full-term GM, and he's going to be a yes man. And it's basically going to be Garfinkel, Stephen Ross, and Silman are the ones that are dictating what this guy does. Like, let me put it this way. You remember when Stephen Ross wanted Lamar Jackson in the draft and Chris Greer said no? I don't think now, obviously, Ross would have been right, but I'm just using that as an example. I don't think Champ Kelly is the type of guy that's going to say no. Now, let's talk about Tua's future now that we're on Tua for a second here, okay? Because Ian Rappaport had a very interesting report yesterday. And it was mentioned that the Miami Dolphins, the possibility of moving off Tua Tagovailoa is very real. So everyone who's dismissing this drafting a quarterback talk, I want you to listen to what I'm about to play. I'm going to play the audio clip of it. Listen to what I'm about to play, all right? Listen to every word. Let's play this.
Chris Greer and the Miami Dolphins separated on Friday morning, officially ending his nearly decade-long tenure as a general manager, starting a tumultuous time for the Miami Dolphins. So, Rich, let me take you through where the Dolphins go from here. First, the starting quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa. My understanding is there is a chance now that the Dolphins replace him as quarterback. He is now playing to keep his job, leads the league with 11 interceptions. If this continues, would not be surprised later in the season if they go to one of his backups or both of his backups, Zach Wilson and Quinn Ewers, the impressive rookie. Mike McDaniel's job is considered safe for the foreseeable future. The Dolphins believe in McDaniel, want him to continue to be the head coach now and through the next year and moving forward. Just got to win, got to keep the team playing for him. If that does not happen, the Dolphins could eventually make a change. And then the trade deadline is coming up in a couple of days. Chris Greer, when he was GM, was kind of reluctant to make moves. My understanding is interim general manager Champ Kelly much more willing. Jalen Waddle is a player they now could consider dealing, but it would take a huge offer to make it happen.
There you go. I want you to listen. What did he say? Tua Tagovailoa is playing for his job, but McDaniel is safe. Think about that for a second. Think about that. McDaniel is safe for now, but Tua Tagovailoa is playing for his job. And then he talks about benching Tua later on. Why would he talk about benching Tua? I'm telling you right now, you know why he's mentioning Quinn Ewers? Because they want to see what they have. They want to see what they have before the draft, especially if they have a top 5 pick. That's exactly right now. But you're not even getting, and listen, he says McDaniel's safe for now. Did he say Tua's safe for now? He said flat out Tua's playing for his job right now. So all of you that are quick to dismiss the quarterback talk, do not be so quick to dismiss it. And we've seen the pivot. We've been talking about it on this channel for months now. We've heard Fowler, Pelissero, all these guys go in front of cameras and say, Mike McDaniel is having to scheme around a guy who can't get hit. Mike McDaniel has to scheme his offense around a guy who's limiting what he can do. Blah, 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 blah. And when that was going on, I was telling you guys, the PR wheels are in motion for McDaniel to come out clean and Tua to be the one. And now, listen, I agree with what you say here, but I think you're thinking the wrong thing. Ross works behind the scenes. Unless he has a good candidate, he's probably not going to fire McDaniel. It's not that, because you say it's a bad year to need a head coach, though, which I agree with. Who are we firing McDaniel for? I believe that's why he hasn't been fired yet. Sir, I'm going to tell you why he hasn't been fired yet. For the same reason Ross is out on Tua. The business decision. The business decision. He doesn't want to look like it was a bad business decision. He's got a scapegoat. A scapegoat's being built up behind the scenes. It's Tua. McDaniel, the rats are scurrying off the ship, people. And what happens when the rats scurry off the ship? The fingers start getting pointed. We've already seen fingers pointed publicly in front of the media. What do you think's going on behind the scenes? Like, and I agree with you, Pete. We would have ruined Lamar Jackson with this franchise, 110%. But this is what I'm saying. He doesn't want to look like he made a bad business decision. But here's the other thing, too. Here is the other thing. And I want you to walk with me on this one. Here, let me put this food for thought on your plate. All right? Let me put this one on your plate. Who's the Champ Kelly connection? Is it McDaniel? I was looking into Champ Kelly. He became a scout for the Denver Broncos in 2007. Mike Shanahan left the Broncos in 2008. So he was over there for 2 years with Shanahan. There's no connection between him and Reggie McKenzie. There's no connection between him and Marvin Allen. Why was Champ Kelly placed in this front office in the offseason? Who put him there? Who was the connection that brought him in? And this is where I'm going right now. Because if that was Mike McDaniel, ladies and gentlemen, and Mike McDaniel, the guy he brought in, is now the interim general manager, guess what? McDaniel played the game and won. He did what Brian Flores tried to do, but Brian Flores failed in. Remember, Brian Flores wanted Chris Greer's job. Brian Flores wanted total autonomy. That's why he went behind Chris Greer's back, and he worked out a deal with the Texans for Deshaun Watson. When Greer came back to Flores and Ross and said, it's too expensive, we can't get it done, Brian Flores turned around, went behind his back to Nick Cassero, because remember, they were linked together during their time in New England. He worked the deal out, brought it to Ross. Ross called Greer in, and the whole thing blew up, and that's when the tension really, really started. But now, if Mike McDaniel got his guy in here and his guy has been elevated to general manager and he got Chris Grier out of the way, think about the power McDaniel might have right now. If Champ Kelly is his guy, and I'm going to look into it. You can bet your bottom dollar. I decided last night I was going to look into this because I was sitting there and I was like, where's this connection coming from? He's not Marvin Allen or Reggie McKenzie. Tom Garfinkel and Ross don't know guys like that. Where's it coming from? And then I looked and I said, oh, he was under Mike Shanahan for 2 years. As we know, Mike Shanahan and Mike McDaniel because of Kyle Shanahan. And I'm like, is this a Shanahan connection? And then, boom, the light bulb went off. Did this guy just play the game and win? Because the reason why, here's the difference between McDaniel and Flores. McDaniel has playoff appearances. Right? Flores played his hand way too early. He didn't have playoff appearances. He was never fighting for a division title in the final week of the season like McDaniel was in 2023. He never got Tua to the level McDaniel did. And think about this. This is what also I thought about too. When they fired Chris Grier, it was what, an hour or two after McDaniel's press conference on Friday? Right? It was only like an hour or two later, right? Correct me if I'm wrong. It was only like an hour or two later. You think Mike McDaniel went into that press conference knowing? Damn right he did. And remember, I think it was like Omar or someone asked him about his job. Or if he had a conversation with Chris Grier about, with Stephen Ross about losing his job. And he was he almost looked like he felt disrespected and gave like an emphatic no and was a little standoffish with the beat writers. Man, if this guy gets fired, the stuff I will tell you guys that I heard at training camp will blow your socks off about Mike McDaniel. I would not put him past this. The stuff I've heard about this guy when I was down at training camp, not good. And you got to wonder yourself, is he the Champ Kelly connection? And does he now have his guy in as interim GM? Right? Because think about this. If they're keeping McDaniel, and this is McDaniel's guy, why do you need to go hire a general manager? You got a guy who's ready and willing and able to collaborate with Mike McDaniel. And then he's clearly already willing to be the yes man and willing to collaborate with Stephen Ross, Tom Garfinkel, and Dan Silman. So he's playing both sides. I'm the yes man to Ross, and I'm Mike McDaniel's buddy. I'm good. I'm telling you, think about this, because this is crazy. He might have just pulled off what Flores couldn't have pulled off. I want you to actually think about that for a second. And then go look up Champ Kelly when we're done here and his background. And you're going to see the only connection you can find is Mike Shanahan. And we all know who came from Mike Shanahan. I called it again, Reason. First Parsons trade, now Mike staying. We could have had Parsons with getting Phillips out at the same time. With picks. Yeah, with packaging Phillips with picks. You're right, man. Yeah. They wouldn't have had to keep him at Green Bay. Like, they wouldn't have had to keep him. You know, you're right. It probably would have cost you a little bit more with picks because, I mean, the player, the Packers, the Parsons trade, the Packers gave up a really good player, right? So, and then you had to turn around. The problem is, bro, you would have had to turn around and pay Parsons right away, right? Like, you would have had to turn around and pay that man, who got a 4-year, $188 million deal. That would have been the problem. That would have been your issue. So, remember, the Cowboys, they received, a 2026 and 2027 first-round pick, and they got a Pro Bowl defensive tackle in Kenny Clark. So you'd have had to give up 2 firsts, Phillips, and probably some mid-rounders because Phillips ain't Kenny Clark. Can't stay healthy. But yeah, you're right. So, anyways, I know I got people's minds in motion with that whole thing. I just want you to take that food for thought and think about it. You know, over 450 of you in the room, smash that like button. Subscribe if you are new. All right, smash, smash, smash. No, man, I'm gonna do you one better. They ain't the Red Sox. They're the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto Maple Leafs haven't won since '67. We're just the new version. And this is why I wanted Ray Agnew. This is why I want Ray Agnew. Look at what the depths Ray Agnew with Brad Holmes helped pull the Detroit Lions out of. The Detroit Lions were the NFC version of us just a couple of years ago. And look at it where it is now. Hey, bro, at least the Islanders won in the 80s. All right? They didn't blow it with Bossy. All right? We blew it with Marino. So, I mean, now, let's get further into the trade deadline because check this one out. Let's get back to Champ Kelly. Check this out, people. As the last call for Sunday Splash reports before the trade deadline arrives, many are planting flags on possible trades to be made by the Dolphins. And while interim GM Champ Kelly may be trying to make the kind of moves that will give him a chance at the permanent job, as one source put it last night, Kelly currently has no chance. So there you go. One source says Kelly has no chance. Kelly doesn't have the keys to the car. Listen to this. Any decisions regarding trades will be approved or not by owner Stephen Ross. The bigger the name, the more closely Ross will look at the deal. As to receiver Jalen Waddle, they absolutely would be a trade ultimately made by Ross, not by Kelly. Waddle's contract as the receiver market goes is favorable at $28.5 million per year. He's one of the few great players the Dolphins have, a building block for the next regime. And he's good enough to fetch a significant haul if when the next regime convinces Ross to move on. With any draft picks secured by Tuesday, no different from the draft picks that would be secured in a postseason move, there's no reason to rush it, unless, of course, Ross is really trying to tank the 2025 season. So a couple interesting notes there. Number one, Florio's source says that Kelly has no chance at the post-2025 gig. Now, I was going to do a GM-centric show, but I'll push that back. I'll drop that for you guys this week still. We'll see what happens tomorrow with the trade deadline. But there you go right there. He says Kelly has no chance. I don't know if I fully believe that. All right? Because you got to ask yourself, okay, now we've already asked the question, who brought in Champ Kelly? Now you got to ask yourself the question, okay, why was Champ Kelly brought in here? Reggie McKenzie was here when Champ Kelly was here. Now, I had heard that he had let it be known he's going back to Tennessee, but Marvin Allen was also here, right? So was obviously Chris Greer. Was Champ Kelly brought in the offseason of, hey, this guy's looking over your shoulder. If you screw up, Chris, this guy's taking over? You got to ask yourself, okay, who brought in Champ Kelly? Where's the connection? And then you got to ask yourself, why? So, that's what's interesting to me. Now, further there, I've said my speculation since we made him the interim GM is that he's going to be a yes man. And now we are getting told that Stephen Ross basically has the handcuffs on him. And what's crazy about this is Stephen Ross is out here approving deals and stuff. How much film has Stephen Ross watched? We got a non-football mind and his little conglomerate of other non-football minds and Tom Garfinkel and Dan Silman approving or disapproving of trades right now. Not great. Not great at all. So there you go, heading into the deadline. Know that if anyone gets traded, Ross is either approving it or not approving it. So, guys, smash the like button. Subscribe if you are new. Over 450 of you in the room. Smash that like button. Smash it, smash it, smash it. Listen, any more news breaks, we will be live. The trade deadline is Tuesday at 4 p.m. So expect to see me again, maybe a few times, all right? Fins up. Dolphins trade Jaelan Phillips for a 3rd-round pick. And they are potentially not done with teams interested in Rasul Douglas, Bradley Chubb, Minka Fitzpatrick, and the Dolphins are also trying to move Matthew Judon. Will they? Well, we're going to find out. Fins up. I'll see you guys on the next one.